talk about these 3/4 inch stall mats. So there are a couple different types you can get. You can get them from any kind of Tractor Supply. They're like 45 bucks. In a basement, you do not want to buy a fresh Tractor Supply mat and put it in your basement. In a garage, totally fine, no problem, because it'll degas. So the problem is they use the cheapest type of rubber, like tires and whatever, and throw it in, mix it up, and then compress it into your mat. And it stinks. They actually have to use different chemicals to get the mat to stick together. So it's gonna smell really, really bad. So the key is finding a mat that's actually a gym quality mat. They're gonna be a little bit more money. They're thicker, they're more regular in size. They're just awesome mats. But the stall mats are great too. I use those as well. This video will help you cut either one of them, whichever you decided to go with. But if you are going into the basement, be prepared for the stink, and it takes a while for that funk to go away if you use a Tractor Supply mat. What you're gonna need today in order to make the mats fit your space is mapping software for your room. So basically, you find a room space, you measure out your room. This was my room space. And so as you can see, each one of these is representing a mat. They're 4 feet by 6 feet. And so what I'm doing is I just took a 4 foot by 6 foot carpet from just a regular room arranger website. And yeah, there were a couple of them. I don't really have a particular preference, so find whatever one works for you. And then I just laid them out and I was like, okay, how is the configuration? This does two things for you. It helps you figure out your room space. And the second thing it does is it tells you how many mats you need to buy, because you do not want to start setting up your gym and have one too few mats. That's going to just be awful. It's going to set you back. You're going to be pissed. And so anyway, don't do that. And you know, the opposite kind of sucks too. If you have one extra mat, you know, obviously you can sell it, or you do what I do and you just try to expand your gym. You tell your wife, you say, oh, honey, I'm so sorry. I got an extra mat. I had to put it somewhere. I'll just set it right next to the gym. So I'm actually working on that. I bought about 10 extra mats. So we'll see how that goes over. But anyway, so this is how I've organized them. And the key on here is, if you can see, that I'm trying to avoid as much of these corners where 4 corners of the mats come into contact with each other. The idea of avoiding these 4 corners of the mats is just for shifting in place, but they're anchored by this wall and they're anchored by this wall. So I'm not tremendously concerned about it, but down here they could shift out. And this is also an open space down here, so they could shift out. So I try to minimize that if at all possible. And so here you can actually see these linear lines here, where the corner does not abut 2 other corners. So that's what you try to do. So you can actually do that in a number of different ways. Let's get into the components that you need in order to make this happen, right? So how are you gonna cut them? How are you gonna get them to the place? Because this was the biggest thing I was dreading when I was setting it up, right? So you have to plan your space, you have to buy the mats, and figure out what space you're going into to determine what kind of mats you want to buy, whether you're going to be in a garage gym, in which case you can just buy any old stall mat from Tractor Supply, and they're just as good, they work just as well, but they stink. So unless you buy used ones, you could always buy used ones off of Facebook Marketplace, or you buy gym quality mats, and then you can take those inside. You can put them in a bedroom, you can put them in a basement, wherever, and they don't smell at all. So then once you have that, you need the components to cut them. I was dreading the cutting them, but it's actually really easy. I cut one the other day, and then I'm finally getting back to my gym because we had some other things going on in the house. And so now I'm trying to lay it all out. So I'm gonna show you how I cut them, and I'm gonna show you the things you need. So here are the things that you need in order to cut your mats and get them to the exact size that you want. All right, so as promised, these are the items that I would recommend having for your project. So first things first, you need something to mark your mat, right? This is actually a cut mat. And so what I use is, this is just a DeWalt chalker. The thing is money, right? So this is amazing. So once you know your lines, and in order to make your lines, you can see this, I use the red chalk, and this was actually just a makeshift chalker, or basically chalk pencil that I made because I was stuck in my basement and they were finishing my floors upstairs and I couldn't go up there. So I just basically dip it in here, and then I can come to the mat and I can just draw my line. right? So that's all you do. So it worked really well, and it's chalk, so it just, you know, I can wipe it off. So different types of chalk. This is 3 out of 4 in terms of permanence. So that means it'll stay there for a little while, so you don't have to worry about just immediately wiping it off. But if you want to get it off, you can just take a Swiffer. So this is the DeWalt chalker. Basically, you just pour chalk in here, and it's got chalk just like this, just the chalk powder in here. And then what you do, let's see, so you put this wherever you want to mark, right? And then you add tension, right? So wherever you have tension, and then you just pull it up and bink, and it just drops and it'll draw a line. But then you just wind it up and you're good to go for your next one. So if we did that, we could do it again. Here is another essential item. You need a tape measure. You got to measure how far you need to make your chalk lines, you know, basically how big that mat's got to be. This is a utility knife. This is the key. I mean, you've got to have a utility knife. You can try it any other ways, but like I said, this is the best way to do it. And the important thing is not just having a utility knife, but having a utility knife with a very sharp blade. These are $1 for 5 blades. So there's no excuse for not having a sharp blade. When your blade's dull, replace the damn blade, right? So those are a couple of the key items that you have to have in order to cut it. Now, the last item is right here. This is actually part of my Rogue deadlift platform. So with this, it's steel. It's not too thick. It's just right. You can use wood, you can use whatever you want. I think it's better to have actually a more narrow surface. So that way when you have the blade, if you were going to compare the blade length, so basically how deep can you go? And when you're actually lined up against it, so you can see I can actually get a pretty deep groove as I'm going down. So when I'm making my cut, I'm following the line and I'm getting a nice deep cut. The bigger the pieces that you use, the more shallow the cut. So obviously you can't get a piece longer than the length of the blade. So figure out your blade, figure out your level of comfort. I will take as much as I can with the straight edge. And so this is that Rogue deadlift platform, but any piece of metal will do. You can use wood, you can use whatever, just something solid, and that's preferably long enough so that way when you make your cuts, you can actually cut all the way through where you need to cut. All right, so here we go. I am going to fill in this spot right here, okay? I'm basically lining up from the back to the front. Since I've already laid out the grid, I know where everything has to be. This mat is perpendicular to the mats next to it, which is why you see here, this corner abuts a flat side of a mat, so there are only 2 corners here. Did the same thing here, which is why I'm gonna have to start making some cuts. All right, so first things first, take your tape measure, measure your space. And then I just drag the mats, because now I know about what I have. And so the easiest way to drag the mats is to flex them so that they're bent opposite to the way, so that, like, if you drag them like this, where they're just sagging, they're nowhere near as easy to move as if you bend them up in the middle, put your knees there, bend the back, and then you're putting pressure on them, drag it in the spot, and then for this small movement, I just tug it, right? So I want it flush, and I just kick it into place, kick it into place. So now I'm working with this side, and I've got this flap. So I will show you this flap. What I do now, I just verify my measurements and see how much I need to cut. Now, what I want to do is I want to mark my mat where I think that it needs to be cut. I'll mark it at a couple points. So the first point I'm going to mark it at is just dip it into the chalk. This is my method. Actually, I kind of like the method, so there's no reason to reinvent the wheel, I think. I mean, it could, but it's not worth it. So I just mark it. I just give it a spot, and then I just keep measuring just to make sure that I'm on track. Give it another mark, and then I'll mark it down here at this end, because really this is where it matters, right? So, because I'm lining up my two ends. So just a hair more than 5 1/4. And with this device, when you initially pull it out away from your mats, because it will shed some of that red chalk, and there's no sense in getting that all over your mats. So, well, extra, I guess I should say. You're gonna get some of it, but that's just inevitable. So then you just go to your line. All right, I'm in my line, and I just pull it up and boop, there it is. Love it. This thing is amazing. Look at this line. This is spot on, right? So not much you can say about that other than hell yeah. All right, so now that we've got the line, I'm gonna take my straight edge. And like I said, it's really nice to have an edge that's at least as long as the area you're going to cut. It's not always gonna happen, I get that, but the key is now you have a chalked outline and you know where you need to cut. So half of this mat is supported by another mat, so it's great because it's giving me elevation, and it makes it easier because there's pressure on the mat pulling it down as I'm pushing on this. So since there's nothing on this side, and you can kind of see that I can squeeze my finger under here. So since there's nothing there, I'm gonna add something. So let me add my mat. So I'm just adding a piece of mat. And this particular piece of mat doesn't need to go all the way in. Remember, you're just trying to give it something to kind of butt up against. This is just another mat I cut off. My first cut happened to be a full piece, so it was longer than 4 feet in length, so it worked out perfectly. This one was not, so I just took one of my other remnants and put it under there. You can put anything you want under there, it doesn't matter. You just want the surface to be as flat and smooth as possible. Straight edge. Take this, I just kneel on this because it's pretty heavy actually, but why not, right? And so then I just start making cuts. And this is where I thought, oh my God, that's gonna suck, like, right? That's gonna just be a lot of cutting. But it's literally already through the meat of the mat. Like, I'm already actually at where, like, the limit. So you can see I can't go any deeper than this. And so now I've cut a good solid groove there. I'm just gonna keep moving down, do the same thing. It's just like rinse, wash, repeat. And so now I'm kind of moving down here, I'm just cutting same way I was cutting before. And then you just cut off the edge. You just go all the way through, nice and smooth. This time I'm putting my hand on it. Obviously you have to be careful with that. I don't know if this is a tool safety thing. This isn't a tool safety video, so pardon me if this isn't safe toolage. But it's up against a steel plate, so I don't think it's gonna, famous last words, right? Here, hold my beer. All right, so now I've got a pretty good line cut out, right? So this is a pretty solid piece that's kind of been cut. Now you get a little bit of overlap. It's not 100% perfect, but it's not bad, right? So then what you do is you prop it up. So I'm just propping it up. I'm taking my hand and I'm just scooping it up. So just scooping it up just like that. So underneath, and I'm just pushing it. You can use a lot of different things. You could actually use some other item to support it, like another piece of, a block of wood would work just fine, right? And so then as you start to get flaps available, you know, this stuff starts to tear. You know, so when I say tear, I mean in a good way, like along your cut line. And so I'm applying a little bit of away pressure. So if this is the mat, I'm pulling away just a little bit. And then I'm just like lifting it up a little bit and then making my cuts. And it is just, I mean, look at all this mat that's cut off, right? So it's like butter. I'm telling you, it's actually kind of satisfying.
Well, A, because I know I'm gonna have my gym floor, but B, it's actually kind of a smooth cut. You know, especially given the fact that I was dreading this in advance, you know. I mean, that's the way I'm huffing right now. You guys are probably like, dude, this guy needs a gym. Which is true, I do need a gym. It's always better to cut it a little bit shorter, or excuse me, a little bit longer than shorter, right? And so what I try to do is I try to tuck this piece and then just really get a nice stiff kind of mat here. Let's see, so I'll just pull this one up. And look at that. Now it's nice and flush and it's perfect. Let me show you. All right, let me show you what this looks like. So here is the mat that I cut. You can barely see through the crack, right? It's just lined up. It looks, you know, I think it looks pretty good. I mean, yeah, there's like a little bit down here at the bottom, whatever. So, you know, there's the piece that came off of it. It's perfect for my space at least. And there you have it. That's pretty much how you cut it. You can do that in any shape, in any design, and anything else, like getting circular saws, getting jigsaws, you're wasting your time. We just cut 4 feet across, I don't know, maybe like 45 seconds, and then you listen to like 10 minutes of me babbling. But so 10 minutes and 45 seconds, which actually 45 seconds of work. So we will kick this one into place. And now we have a perfectly placed, perfectly flush mat. And like I said, don't be alarmed if it's a little bit too long. Don't try to shave off 1/4 inch. Try to see if you can fit it in there. Bend the mat and fit it in there and then stomp on it. Because you don't want your mat separating. Always cut longer than you think you're gonna need, but by 1/4 inch or less, 1/4 to 1/8 inch. And then that should be about right. Good luck, guys.